Hello everyone, and welcome to our second of the Scot Women Skills panel series. Today's topic is on independent working with advice from freelancers. My name is Elena Soper and I'll be chairing the session today. I currently work full-time, as Amy said, as the National Programmes Coordinator for YWCA Scotland, but I am also a freelancer on the side. I have done a variety of freelance gigs, from data gathering for Engender's Sex and Power Report 2020 to catering talk action workshops at the Melting Pots. Currently, I am also the co-director of the Empower Project, which is a role I do in a freelance capacity, as it's not salaried. So I know a bit about freelance, so I hope that I can bring some of that expertise in my role as chair today. So when we were developing our Scot Women Share series, we wanted to ensure that we included a practical advice session on freelancing and what this actually means for you, which is something I wish I had when I started out freelancing in April last year. Hopefully you will come out of this session with a clear idea of what it's like to be a woman working as a freelancer in Scotland. And our expert panel, who I'll introduce in a second, will share their knowledge and help you understand the value of your skills, the practicalities of self-employment, and the best advice that they were given when they started out. So I'm really excited to introduce you to our panel today, all of whom bring different experiences and sectors to the table. So the first panelist we have is Lisa Kennedy. Lisa is a freelance dance artist and choreographer, a former pro sports cheerleader and dance artist in residence for Scottish dance traditions. In 2009, she formed the 1940s/50s inspired dance troupe, the Kennedy Cupcakes, who continue to entertain audiences across the UK. Performing, choreographing, and teaching professionally for various organisations over the last 17 years, her work as a freelance artist has included productions with Tron Theatre, Theatre Royal Glasgow's Stage Experience, and over 10 musical theatre productions for ACAOS. She also co-choreographed a piece for the 2010 Commonwealth Games handover ceremony in Glasgow. Not only that, but in 2019, Lisa established The Braw and the Brave, a podcast about people and their passions. The art of good conversation and sharing stories to inspire, move, and motivate others is something she values greatly, featuring those who love what they do and do what they love. From artists to dancers, world travellers to musicians, Lisa has connected with an array of people to talk about their passions and the experiences that have shaped their lives. We also have Briana Pegado. Briana is the Executive Director of Creative Edinburgh. A social entrepreneur, Briana was named one of Scotland's 30 under 30 inspiring young women by us in 2017, and she is also on our board. She is the co-founder of POVO and founder and director of the Edinburgh Student Arts Festival. Her work centres around financial sustainability for creative organisations, barriers young people face to the arts, festivals, and human-centred design processes. Thirdly, we have Dani Trudeau. Dani started her first enterprise at the age of 14 years old and her first private company at 25. Dani is curious about what makes a good business. Even more, she is keen on changing work to work for you and reimagine how work can support your life. She is a creative social entrepreneur who founded Tribe Porty, a community co-working and creative events social enterprise in 2014, and Tribe Women, a community for enterprising women in 2018. Dani is committed to redesigning the ways we live and work to lead connected, full and healthy lives. And last but not least, we have Talat Yaqoob. Talat is an independent consultant and researcher, as well as a co-founder of The Collective, which is a feminist consultancy. She's currently working across a number of areas, including migrant rights, public attitude change, and community responses to COVID-19. Her work is founded on public participation and intersectional analysis. She has over 12 years of experience in the third sector and was most recently the director of Equate Scotland. Talat is also a member of the First Minister's Advisory Council on Women and Girls and a Fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. So thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to dive straight in with the very first question, which will give everyone a chance to hear from you and not from me. So the first question that I have is, can you give us a little bit more information about your freelancing journey? How did it start and what made you go freelance? So just because of the way that you are on my screen, we will start off with Lisa.
Wow, I'm in amazing company today. Thank you so much, and thanks for that lovely introduction. Yeah, like you said in the introduction there, well, dance has always been in my life from a young age. Although I think probably as a youngster I didn't think it was a viable career option, and now I'm like, everybody should dance. But it certainly wasn't something that I thought I was going to do full time, and certainly not something I thought I was going to do freelance, self-employed. But yeah, so actually I did an English degree in a past life. But danced all the way through university and was earning some money, while I was at university performing. And like you said in the introduction, I auditioned to be part of a pro cheerleading squad. Did a bit of travelling around Scotland, around the UK and also abroad. And that was a great opportunity to develop as a dancer, as a performer. But in that time, I was also teaching as well. So fast forward to 2005. I got a post with Scottish Traditions of Dance Trust. It was supposed to be like a year and a half. It was a funded post to basically promote the traditional dances of Scotland, namely Cayley and Highland, which were dance styles that I was familiar with. But quite keen not to pigeonhole myself into that particular dance style. I kept my other styles going, so I was teaching elsewhere, had like classes locally, young people's classes in hip hop and stuff. In terms of dance styles, I've done a broad spectrum of different styles, so I would say definitely like a master of none, but definitely have dabbled in lots of different styles of dance. But luckily my time at the trust was longer than expected, and they found the money to keep me, and I was there for 6 years actually, which was amazing, but just very much was aware that this could always come to an end. It was a funded post. We were supported by Creative Scotland, so just very much was doing other things as well as doing this full-time position. So I was based in Clackmannanshire, based at the council in Clackmannanshire for a while, which is great because you're just getting other perspectives and being in a different kind of environment. So it was very much like CPD for me. Working at the trust was amazing, because going from being a freelancer, I guess, while at uni, and maybe a year or so on my own, going into the trust really opened that world of working for an arts organisation. But yeah, in 2011 they lost their funding and they closed, and I got made redundant. And I think it was just as well that I had kept my hand in lots of different dance styles, and by that time I had started my dance troupe, which you kindly mentioned, the Kennedy Cupcakes, and that just was born out of, I had not been performing for about a year after the Rockettes, and was just missing performing. But definitely I think my crop top and hot pants days were over, so that's when I decided to start the troupe, and they did really well and we're still going strong. So yeah, just the freelancing thing was very much just like a necessity. I think I just was like, right, well, there's not loads of jobs like mine kicking about. So I had contacts. I worked in schools in the Clackmannanshire area already, and they kindly were able to keep me on. Alva Academy in that area have a school of dance, which a lot of high schools have now, and they've been very good to me and they've kept me on. And yeah, just started to reach out to people that I had worked with through the trust, and was choreographing for some theatre groups, and yeah, just branched more into the choreographic side of things as well, and that's where I've been able to work with like the likes of the Tron and Theatre Royal. And yeah, just so it was born out of necessity. It was just like, well, you don't have a job now, what are you going to do? And I'm delighted, although it was gutting at the time to lose that job. I would have liked to have seen the trust continue even if I had decided to leave, but it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, that was 2011, and I think it's just like a three-pronged approach for me. I still have the performance side of things, and I'm 38 now, but it's still nice to be performing to some degree. I then have the choreographic side of things, which I do obviously for the cupcakes, but also for theatre and for amateur theatre. And then I do a lot of education work. So I've been working on an NHS programme for the last 7 years called Max in the Middle, which is an amazing health and wellbeing programme for P5 and up. I absolutely love that programme. That's just given me another kind of realm to work in and just developing the skills all the time. So yeah, I could rabbit on, but that's really where I'm at just now. And obviously COVID, well, we'll get there, I'm sure. But yeah, so that's where I'm at just now. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Dani, want to go next? Dani, you're on mute. Love the COVID world.
Sorry, I'm so engrossed in Lisa, I forgot the actual initial question.
So the initial question was, can you give us a bit more information about your freelancing journey? How did it start, and why have you chosen this to be your career?
Okay. Yeah, so you mentioned my first enterprise at 14. I too was a dancer, not anymore, but I was. Ballet, tap and jazz since the age of 7, and by the time I was 14, I was teaching classes to younger people and adults to pay for my tuition for my other classes. And I was born in a tiny town in South Dakota called Kadoka, like population 200. And when I was a little bit older, we moved up to a bigger city, which was about 90 miles away. And so in South Dakota, believe it or not, you can have your driver's license at 14. And so I decided that there was no dancing in Kadoka, so I would teach summer dance classes. So I scoped out and found a hall, put up flyers, and taught dance to kind of 5 to 13-year-olds all summer long. So I got a real taste of, I suppose, that kind of confidence, and you've got a skill, I've got a sellable skill, I made a lot of money for a 14-year-old. So I guess I never really thought much about being a freelancer or an entrepreneur. It was kind of it was naturally in there. I suppose my dad is a bit of an entrepreneur, so I guess maybe I was exposed to it. So I, like probably all of us, we've had many lives and many jobs, and there's no one route to where you're at now, probably. So I too was on the path of becoming a professional dancer, but and I went to a performing arts university, but injured my back. So that dream came crashing down, and I had a side gig working with children with autism, doing applied behavior analysis. And after I graduated with an education degree and a dance degree, I was offered a job to do applied behavior analysis. So I took it. I almost moved to San Francisco to try to dance again, but I took this job and they offered me to relocate to Scotland, which brought me here. So I was a consultant when I moved over here at 23, and when I was 24, my clients asked me to start my own business because they preferred me over my partner who I was working with. So I did. I, again, didn't think much of it. It also gave me a chance to apply for a visa because I was on a work permit at the time. So I did that, and I was lucky enough to get one. And I did ABA consulting for 5 years throughout the UK, working in partnerships with schools and third sector organisations and local authorities. But I didn't love it. It was good. I then got pregnant with my son and decided that traveling with a small baby was rather tricky. So I got a third sector job in a big kind of charity, still with autism. But within that role, I had lots of different roles. I set up some housing support initiatives, and then I moved on to occupational support. And then I started a social firm through that charity. And I really fell in love with the models of social enterprise and social firms. I thought the kind of business skills attached to social and environmental aims just kind of fit what I wanted to do. So I thought, wow, I need to learn more. So I went and got a job with SENSCOT, Social Entrepreneurs Network Scotland, which was a brilliant opportunity to learn about Scotland and how they support social entrepreneurs, but also to learn more about the Scottish Government. At that time, it was health and social care integration, so I learned a lot about that and the intermediaries that supported all third sector organisations and social enterprises. Wasn't my dream job. I loved it. I learned so much, but I never wanted to stay there. So all that time, I kind of thought what was burning in the back of me, what I wanted to do. And around that time, I started trade school Edinburgh as well. it wasn't for business, it was a labor of love, but basically it was kind of a global platform. You could start a chapter in your city, kind of like Creative Mornings, but it was skills and knowledge exchange based on bartering. So a teacher would teach, say, anything. It could be anything. We went from like computer skills to yoga classes to cross stitch to calligraphy. And instead of money, people paid with barter items that you listed. So, I mean, one guy taught computer science and he wanted meat, so we brought sausages for him. But there was really something nice about that kind of human exchange and social capital and human capital. And I really fell in love, and I thought, this is actually what I want to do. I want to create spaces where this kind of learning, interaction, and connection can happen. So I asked my local community what they wanted, what they needed. I did a big survey, and it came back that people wanted a co-working space, which is not something I had in mind, but they wanted a co-working space. They wanted somewhere to connect. They wanted somewhere to do physical activities. They wanted something for old people and something for young people and something in the arts or creativity. So that helped me write my business plan for Tribe. I found a space, made a space, and we now have about 100 freelancers working from Tribe. We did have about 26 classes a week. We've got none right now. But it's a great space, and we have a wonderful variety of different freelancers. And then in 2016, I realized that we had about 70% female entrepreneurs there. And so I started speaking to all of them about how else we could support them better. And there were lots of common themes. So then I launched Tribe Women, which is it was an 8-month program where we kind of go through business skills, but also wellness skills. So it's one thing to create a business, but it's another thing to create a business and lose all your pals, have no relationships, maybe sacrifice your health because you're working so hard. So I wanted to create a program that could redefine success, think differently about what we value. And it isn't just about money, it's about, you know, a good quality of life, you're tending your creative side, your relationships, and make viable businesses that contribute to the world a bit better. So that's it, yeah, that's me from a quick tour.
Thank you very much. Talat, you're probably the newest freelancer, at least on the panel. Tell us a bit about why you've decided to take this on full time.
Sure. So I have been working in the third sector, doing all kinds of feminist things for a long time now. I'm working on equalities, and I've been doing work on campaigning, public affairs, training, facilitation, political influencing, different things like that. And most of it has been around women's rights, race equality, and intersectional analysis. I have actually done a little bit of consulting before. The last time I did it was 2013-14 when I was studying. So I was doing a full-time master's, and this was a bit of consulting, really quite low level consulting, was a way of me getting through my master's and making a little bit of money to try and not be completely overwhelmed by debt by the time I finished it. But earlier this year, I decided to go full-time as a freelancer, as an independent consultant. And a global pandemic is, of course, not the ideal time to do that, but I thought I would give it a try anyway. I handed in my notice 2 weeks before official lockdown, which was brilliant. But part of the reason for doing it is because I loved my job at Equate Scotland. I was privileged to work with a phenomenal team of dedicated feminist women who just got stuff done, right? And so it was hard to leave that. But part of the reason for leaving is knowing when you've given your ideas, you've said what you do, and it's time for someone else to have some new ideas. I never want to be that person that's, 15, 20 years in and everybody around them's thinking, why are they still here? So I thought it was the right time. I had done what I wanted to do, particularly on kind of financial stability of the organisation, and I had learned a lot about strategy whilst I was there. So I had done that for 4.5 years, and I thought, you know what, I've changed what I came in to change, and even though it's heartbreaking, it's time to do something new. And what I decided to do was set myself up as a consultant, and along with Ellie Hutchison and Kate Nevins, I founded The Collective, which is kind of the first of its kind feminist consultancy in Scotland for all your public affairs research and analysis needs and project management needs. And essentially it is a space where you can come and collaborate, and organisations can think about whether they are working in the third sector, whether they are feminist organisations, can apply feminist intersectional analysis to their work, which everyone should be doing anyway. So it's a space for that to happen. Despite it being during a pandemic, it has, you know, touch wood, gone quite well. I'm trying not to think about the fact that I'm working off an ironing board right now. Other than me not having an office and an infrastructure, it's going quite well. At the moment, I do that as part of The Collective, and then I also have my own independent bits of work that I'm doing. So independent work that I'm doing is with Just Right Scotland, where I'm their senior public affairs consultant, and I am working on migrants and asylum seeker and refugee rights. So campaigning to create a better Scotland for them. Part of the reason for doing it is, firstly, I have caring responsibilities and I needed more flexibility. I needed to be able to stop some things and do 3 days a week, and when I've got more capacity, do 5 days a week, and just to, you know, grow and lessen as and when I needed it, dependent on my caring responsibilities, which are also come in waves and are up and down. So having the ability to do that without having lots of management responsibilities as the chief exec of an organisation is what created the need for this. The other thing was learning quite a lot about myself over the last, 12, 13 years of working. I realised that sticking me in something that exists for 5 years, 6 years isn't actually getting the best of me. Giving me a contract to do some injection of work that's needed for 3 months, 6 months, maybe 9, is me at my best. I will do it quickly, I will learn everything about it, I'll soak it up, and I'll create something good. But really, I've learned that I've got the attention span of a goldfish. And so if that's the case, doing something on a 6-month contract is you getting the best of me, because I'm quite thirsty to do new things all of the time. So learning that about myself made me realize actually consultancy and taking on contracts and doing different things, even if it's for a year, but 3 or 4 different types of things, is me working at my maximum capacity, is me making the most of whatever mindset I have and makeup in my brain that I have. So learning that about myself and applying that is what got me to independent consultancy. And, you know, touch wood, so far so good. And I'm thinking, if I manage to start it off and sustain it in a pandemic, I'll be fine. It was a bit of a baptism of fire, but so be it. And I've had an opportunity to work with really great people and lots of little teams of people doing very different things in Scotland. And I think for that reason, it's certainly been the right decision.
Great. So lastly, before we jump on to questions, some that are pre-prepared, some that I can see are coming in, Briana, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Hi team, I haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see your faces. Hi everyone, I'm Briana. You heard my bio, but what's funny about it is my very first freelance gig was for the very organization I run now. So in 2015, I was working for an organization that I left, and I left because I was already running something called the Edinburgh Student Arts Festival. I'd graduated from university. I'd spent a year after university as president of the Students' Association. I was the first Black woman president at Edinburgh University Students Association, and that was a wild ride. Not a story to share for today, but I had gone on to run this festival, and I was running it off my back. We had a team at the time, I think, of about 15 people that were running, curating, organizing, designing a week-long and then what turned into a month-long festival for 3,000 people. Our last year, we had 7,000 people come through our doors and about 500 artists and creative people show their work. And the idea behind the festival was that I, as a very privileged woman who'd been to university in Scotland as an American, was feeling barriers to working in the arts and creative sector. Though I was in a band, I also danced, but I'm not gonna mention my dance days as I was very young. My mom was a ballet dancer. But my whole family is very creative, and I think the kind of lessons and the messages I was told when I was younger by my grandparents and my mom and my dad was, dad less so. My mom was like, you're not going into the arts. You're just not doing that. That's not going to pay you any money. You know, she left her dreams behind as a ballet dancer, but now in her mid-60s, she teaches ballet and she's back in the arts. So the dream doesn't have to die. But I was very much told and kind of pursued a sensible, it sounds ridiculous, but a more sensible degree. So I studied international relations and then sustainable development. You know, that I think some of what Dani said around social enterprise and kind of all of those values are very much how I approach things and kind of embedded in the way that I interact with the world. But the creative side was missing. And I left my full-time job, to be honest, and I'm going to share all the things you shouldn't do. My best friend heard me complaining over a drink one night, stole my phone and wrote my resignation letter and sent it to my boss. And I'm happy she did it. I mean, I let her do it, but it was kind of one of those moments of like, should I have done that? And needs must, I needed work. I was living with my partner who gratefully and thankfully owned his flat, so I could go a couple of months without paying rent, but I needed to find work. And I remember I probably sent that in October. In November, he was, and I'm not giving him all the credit, but this is what he said to me. He said, you know, what are you going to do for work? And I'd been applying for things. I wasn't getting anywhere. And Creative Edinburgh was running its annual awards ceremony. And I'd worked with Creative Edinburgh because of the Edinburgh Student Arts Festival. And basically, I knew that Janine, who was running it at the time, had one other staff member who was leaving. And I, amongst many things, as many freelancers do, I'm a very good events planner and coordinator. I ran a festival across the city. So I figured maybe Janine needed some help with the award ceremony. And I remember my partner saying to me, because I was like, I don't know what to charge for my rate. I don't even know how to ask this question. He's like, look, if you don't ask, you don't get. And if she says no, she says no. So I sent her an email and I said, hey, do you need any help running your awards? You know, I have these credentials, here's my CV. She's like, oh yeah, great. And she's like, what's your rate? And I sent her a rate, which I will still not divulge today. And I remember her response sort of being like, I mean, that's more than I charge. And when I looked at my rate, I thought that shouldn't be right. That shouldn't be more than you charge. I didn't say that to her, but she was like, I mean, I'll pay it, but wow. And I was thinking, what on earth is she charging people for her day rate? And, you know, I think what I'm going to say mostly, I'm not going to go into all of it. I'll kind of keep it brief so we can get on to question and answer. But, you know, there's that saying, and someone said it earlier, you know, a jack of all trades, a master of none, right? But the quote, the full quote is, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So that's something I want everyone to remember about freelancing. I have always had about 3 or 4 jobs. I have always been freelancing and running. I ran a whole festival with all these people while I was working either part-time elsewhere or part-time 2 jobs elsewhere. So I was constantly juggling things. I remember sitting in meetings, like responding to emails for the Edinburgh Student Arts Festival. Every time my boss walked by, just like getting the tab open, because I was efficient, I was fast, so I could manage time well. And I think that's one thing you have to do, is manage your time well. It's not always going to happen, but you do your best to manage your time well. Yeah, if you don't ask, if you don't get, jack of all trades, don't forget that. But also I think the biggest thing I've learned, particularly working in the arts and creative industries, yes, I think all of the women on this call have a level of skill and experience and have really cultivated that, and you will do that along your journey. But to be honest, no one knows what they're doing. Like, that is the bottom line. Most people are making it up. And yes, they know what they're doing sometimes for a bit. They don't know what they're doing sometimes for a bit longer. So you maybe don't know what you're doing for 10 years, that turns into kind of knowing what you're doing, right? But, you know, this imposter syndrome may or may not always be there, but people are making it up. And I'm not saying they're not making it up without skill. There's skill involved, there's expertise, there's collaboration, there's so many things that come into it. But I do remember a dear friend of mine saying to me, she's like, Google's my best friend. And Google is the best friend of many people in the creative industries. That's not to undermine the expertise and skill of maybe your training or your background or your degree or other things that are going to come into your freelance practice, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. And I've worked across the National Theatre of Scotland. I've worked for the University of Edinburgh Social Responsibility and Sustainability Department. I've worked for a consultancy called One Stone Advisors that was a sustainability consultancy for corporates. I once had someone say to me, Briana, you know, oh, lipstick on my teeth, there you go. Once say to me, Briana, you know, you can't continue working across 3 sectors. You know, no one gets away with working across the third sector, private sector, and public sector. And I just thought they were being a bit ridiculous. I think they were a bit jealous. But, you know, they said that to me and I was a bit like, well, I've never fit into one sector. And I guess what I want to leave you with is, you know, your freelance career, I don't like that word, but career, your freelance journey, because we used journey earlier, is yours to make. And it's going to take you in some very strange directions. I think the most important thing that I've found is knowing what my values are and sticking to them and kind of checking in with what my values are. And sometimes you're going to do work that just has to pay the bills. Sometimes you're going to work and collaborate with people and just learn from it. I think being able to take risks is really important. I've taken many silly risks and thankfully they worked out. But, you know, it has come down to needing to make money and pay my rents. And I think at least in the creative sector and creative industry, sometimes you have more space and flexibility to take those risks maybe than elsewhere. But also I think there are so many support networks, organizations, spaces where you can find help, but it's not easy. And I definitely hit burnout with it in 2017. And since then have really thought about how to juggle my time and what's important to me. But yeah, I am now not freelance. I know it's a cheating, but I still do some freelance work, but I've been full-time employed for a year now, which is a very odd feeling. But I think we'll get to the Q&A later, so I'll leave it there.
We're going to get to the Q&A now. So I have some questions that we've written and some of the questions that have been asked in the chat box as well really fit into this. So I'm just going to jump straight in with the tax question, right? Because let's be honest, when you think about becoming a freelancer, when you know someone's becoming a freelancer, the first thing that you do that you freak out about is tax. And I can attest to this because I messaged Briana asking, how on earth do I do a tax return? And there's also a question that's come through from Jenny, which is specifically about managing tax. So it is the nightmare of January. Does anyone have any quick practical advice on how to manage your tax? Briana?
3 things not to do that I have done. 1, submit your tax, your self-assessment via paper, because you can do it paper form by the 31st of October, or you can do it in January by the 31st of January. I am not a British citizen yet, so I don't often have a P60. In order to submit it online, you need a P60, you need a British passport, or you need some other identification that I never seem to have. So I have to do mine by hand, and I prefer to do it by hand because it's a couple of months before the deadline. Now, if you do it by hand, don't post it on the 31st of October. Please do it earlier. I've learned that mistake several times because I've been fined late fees several times, even though I thought I'd sent it on time. Don't do that. Secondly, save some money. I know I haven't always had the money to save it, right? I've been that real idiot who's been living in my overdraft, has credit card bill, and has no savings. So I understand what it's like to have no money, but you do need to save a percentage of your income for your tax bill. Don't just take it all in and be like, great, this is all my money. Make sure to put some money aside. Third thing not to do, and to be honest with you, it's not that scary. You know, some people get an accountant. That might be a couple £100 if you can, that will read over your self-assessment for you. You could do it with pals. I've had self-assessment parties where I've sat there with pals and we've had our spreadsheet and all of our receipts and we've just walked through it. Keep a record of all of your outgoings and incomings. If you're not used to doing a budget or to doing accounts, it's very valuable to do. It saves time later. But I have not only submitted my self-assessment late and been fined, I have not saved money to pay towards my tax bill, all the things you shouldn't do. I have also been fined for 12 months of late fees, which was not my fault. I filled out my self-assessment, the signature wasn't, there, stupidly, I just forgot to sign it, and moved house and didn't tell HMRC, and they tried to get in touch with me only once, but they waited a year to then tell me I had £12,000 worth of late fees. Look, it's fine, I appealed it, I didn't have to pay it, but all I'm saying is it's not the end of the world, but please just get things in order ahead of time, and it's not that difficult to fill out. As you start making more money, get someone to check over it, because I've declared income in the wrong box, which has actually meant that I've had to pay more tax than I should have. So those are all things I'm telling you not to do.
When I first became a freelancer, the one thing that I was told was to open like an ISA and put all of my tax money in the ISA. So as soon as that paycheck comes in, you go, no, this is going over there. So everyone's different. I put 30% aside, which means that when I don't have to pay as much, I give myself an annual bonus, which is great. So, does anyone else have anything they want to come in on tax before we move on?
I'm a big fan of tax. As somebody who is super left-wing, tax is great. It's coming back to us through our hospitals and our environment and our education. So big fan. Just not a huge fan of the bureaucracy around it, right? So, but one of the things that I would suggest is there are actually quite a few places where you can go online, and there's like an accounting for freelancers, and you can get there's webinars that you can do for free just to learn about it. There's quite a few online guides about how to submit a self-assessment tax return, because actually it's scary because we've made it quite scary, but it's actually quite self-explanatory once you're in it. I would definitely make sure that you're keeping some money to the side and anticipating what it is that you're doing, but also making sure that you're not going across the threshold of things like VAT as well, when you have to start charging VAT. So you need to, it's not just about tax, it's also about how you charge as well. So you need to figure out how much you think you're going to make in the year, and then whether you're going to need to apply VAT to that. And then you've also got to work out whether you are a sole trader, whether you're setting up as a company and paying yourself dividends and things like that. So I think that what I would really recommend is that you find a cheap accountant and you spend an hour with them to understand the tax system. You might never have to ask them to do anything again, but I would recommend that 1 hour with someone to go through what you predict or what you think your year ahead is going to look like, or your next tax return is going to look like. Help them, ask them to help you understand it so that you don't actually need to pay somebody to do it again. You can do it yourself, but almost like asking an accountant to go through a 1 hour tutorial of how this is actually going to work for you is a really good thing to do, and I found it really helpful.
Lisa, did you have anything to add to that? I'm just conscious that we've only got 20 minutes left and I've only asked one question.
Only that I was going to say, initially I remember having like shoe boxes full of receipts and stuff, and then at the end, of the year going, oh man. So now I definitely like Polly Pocket, like the weeks and stuff. So you're amazing advice from you guys. Like, I've been very lucky. My mum is my accountant. She's amazing. But obviously I still have to be very organised for her. I can't go to her with a shoebox full of stuff. So yeah, and the whole saving money, in the past I have been like, well, that big job or those big jobs will pay for my tax bill. But actually in more recent years, I've been more disciplined in putting money away every single week or every single month, and that massively helps. So I would just reiterate that.
Fabulous, thank you. So something that Talat mentioned there, I'm just going to bring up because it links in with the question that I had for Dani, which is, rather than being a sole trader or freelancer, you're more in social enterprises, more your own businesses. What is the difference between those, and are there some benefits to one or the other?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm a social enterprise, which is I'm a community interest company. So I'm basically a company by guarantee with an asset lock. So I can't have shareholders, and I don't pay myself dividends, but I do pay myself a salary. So technically I'm employed by my business. So there are very different tax, and I had to have an accountant, partly because I had some grants, initial startup grants from different funders, and I ran some different projects. And so the money was very specific to those projects, but also I was renovating a capital asset. So again, I wouldn't have known how to put those bits of spend in the places that my accountant knew to do it, because it was at a different percentage for a certain amount of money over a certain amount of time, which there's just no way I would have known that. But I also pay corporation tax, so I do have to pay attention to profits. Yeah, I've got a payroll department too, because I've got employees, so it's quite different. I remember being self-employed, and I too got fined for submitting late. The best thing I did when I started Tribe was sign up to Free Agent or any other Xero, or there's lots of different software, but it kept everything. It links up to my bank account, and I create all my invoices through it. Tells me how much profit, how much loss. You can do P&L reports really quickly. You can itemize everything. You can upload your receipts all there. You know who's paid, you know who's paying on late all the time, you know who's your best customer. So I would recommend, if you think you're going to have a business that's that type of business where you're going to be invoicing, we invoice a few dozen every month. So it's too much to keep up spreadsheet and a Word doc. There was just no way that I would be able to do that. So I would recommend a software system like that if that's the kind of business you're getting into.
That's great, thank you. Next question, there is one that's come in from Steph on the chat that links in with something you've already touched on, Lisa, but just to pick up on that again. So obviously you have already talked about the fact that you have worked full-time as well as freelancing, and then have done multiple projects and different things, juggling all at the same time. So how do you kind of handle juggling all of this? You also do a podcast on the side and prioritize, and that kind of links in with the question from Steph, which is specifically about how do you juggle starting this alongside a full-time job?
Good question. I'm thinking back. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of freedom at the Dance Trust as dancer in residence. It was an amazing organisation. The people I worked with were super supportive. So yeah, very much just that was essentially a 9 to 5 really. So I had my evenings and weekends to myself. There, it was the occasional event or whatever that we to be a part of. So it did free up some time to, like I said, keep classes going in the evenings. And when I started the cupcakes, then it was mostly gigging at the weekends and evenings anyway. But yeah, it was quite a juggle. I guess as I knew that the Dance Trust was unfortunately folding and we were all trying to figure out what we were going to do next, we had a wee bit more time. There wasn't as much teaching and stuff going on and events as the organisation was closing down, that then I really was able to step up my game in terms of taking on more. And the cupcakes have ran 1940s 50s events with hundreds of people coming to them, and those were all things that actually now I look back and go, I was like super brave. I think the older I get, I'm like, geez, I should really look back to like my former self. Like I think I was just a bit more like gung-ho when I was younger. And I think, yeah, just that juggling now as a freelancer, some things like, I have weekly classes. So I go to Alva Academy twice a week at this time, and I know what's happening there. And obviously there's a certain amount of prep that goes into that, but that's that done. Whereas, up until recently, I was working on a musical, Oklahoma, and that was a 6-month stretch. I knew that I was going to be in rehearsals on a Tuesday, and then nearer the time it was going to be a Sunday, and then obviously it's all consuming and you can't eat, you have to eat, sleep and breathe it type thing. So yeah, it's a mixture of projects that have got a start date and an end date, and then the ongoing things like classes that pretty much run the same way every week, and there's not as much prep the NHS programme that I work on, it's great because we have a team meeting, we really brainstorm all the ideas, we get everything down, and then we just go into schools and deliver it. And obviously working in the arts, every day is a school day and every day is different, but that project I love because we know what we're going in to deliver. And it does change up and there is room for creativity, but it's not as full on in terms of like if I'm working on a musical or if I'm working at the Tron. So yeah, I've just got a bit of a balance of stuff that takes up tons of brain power and tons of hours, and other stuff that I can get it done and put it to one side for a week. Hope that's helpful.
No, that's great, thank you. Just touching on what you mentioned there about the arts. So looking at you, Briana, if you think back to your days as an arts freelancer, but also I guess in your role as the director of Creative Edinburgh, when we kind of look at the creative sector, I guess we all assume that there are vast numbers of people that work freelance across, a range of really different types of art. So looking at design, theatre, music, what support is there in Scotland for people working in that sector as freelancers?
That's a great question. I'll answer that, but I want to quickly say something about the previous question as well. Is part of the reason why I work freelance and I'm in the role that I am, and I will probably continue to work freelance after this, is because I cannot stand having a boss. Like, that is just the bottom line. I can't stand having a boss. I never want one again, and I never wanted one in the first place. At the moment, my boss is the board of directors, and I'm on it as well. So there's a body that's managing me. And I went to Montessori school for a very young age, and I think that just in the best way possible ruined me for life when it comes to authority. I don't do it. So if that's how you feel the freelance lifestyle is for you, it doesn't mean you don't have to work with people, collaborate, compromise, but it just means managing your time better. So on the kind of working full-time or freelance and alongside freelance work, I mean, the one thing I would say is that I'm not a creature of routine or habits. I can't stand either of those things, but I do require structure. So I find that instead of telling myself I'm going to do the same thing at the same time every day, to make time for, my freelance gig, my side hustle. I always saw like the freelance work I was doing as my main work. And even if I had a full-time job, that was the side hustle. Of course, I focused enough attention on what I was doing. It wasn't about that, but it was more that, where my heart was lying at that moment in time was in the creative work that I'd set up. But I think, a good tip is to really focus on, giving yourself not like a routine every day, but maybe it's, I'm going to spend 3 hours a week doing this, whether or not it's just managing your social media, or you're going to spend half an hour doing your accounts, whatever else. That was just to say that on support, it depends on what sector you're in the arts. There's a lot of growing support in Scotland. So there are creative networks like Creative Edinburgh. Ours is one of the oldest. We're turning 9 in November. Yeah, that's right. And the idea around Creative Edinburgh is that we're a community for creative people to connect and collaborate. And the main thing is around building confidence. So everything from our networking events to one-to-one support, to our digital events, to our drop-in sessions, is about that. We're quite a small team. We've grown a little bit over the last couple of years, but we have a membership directory. We promote people's work through our newsletter, our social media channels, and we have a massive jobs and opportunities board. So if you're looking for collaborations and opportunities, you can look there. I'm sure Dani can say a lot about the support around kind of social entrepreneurs and social enterprise as well, but you've got creative networks like Creative Dundee, Creative Stirling, Creative Inverclyde. There used to be something called the Cultural Enterprise Office, which was for cultural and creative entrepreneurs. That's turned into the Future Economy Company, and they run a program called the Creative Entrepreneurs Club. It's a bit pricier, so you do have to pay for membership. Creative Edinburgh, you don't, and other networks, you don't, but there are a lot of skills, advice, and support there. There's obviously Creative Scotland, our National Arts Council, but there are many kind of informal networks like Tribe 40, like The Collective, which is run by the Delicate Rebellion, which is a great kind of resource for women that are entrepreneurs or creative people or freelancers working in the creative sector and creative industries. There are things like Creative Mornings, which Dani mentioned, which was a free breakfast event that happens the last Friday of each month all over the world. the Edinburgh chapter is running their events digitally and there's time to network and meet people. We run an event the first Tuesday of every month called Creative Circle. So there's a lot out there. And I'd say once you go to one of these networks and find out, and kind of, if you can attend virtually or send them an email, they'll signpost you, or we will, to many other networks and opportunities. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard. It doesn't mean that you're not still going to have to work and make things work for you, but at least there are spaces for you to speak to other people that are like-minded and are going through the same things and working out the same problems, and potentially finding work together and bringing in more clients. Or, you know, most of my work that I found throughout my freelance career, I was referred by someone I knew and by word of mouth, because they trusted me and knew that they trusted my work. And I think on the one hand, that can be quite daunting, because your thought might be, well, how do I break into this then? Or how do I get my first job or my first client? You know, sometimes you can apply for things. There are tenders out there from, you know, public bodies, trust institutions saying we need a freelancer. But if you're finding it hard, going to those networks and being very straightforward about the fact that you have certain skills and you're looking for work, you know, those seeds that you plant will sprout and grow later on. So I think that then the kind of role of networks is really important in this work.
That's great, thanks Briana. And on that, I kind of noticed you nodding a lot there, Talat, and I just wanted to jump in on that kind of getting yourself started, which is something that we came across really as what inspired this series, which is, how on earth do you know how much to charge for yourself? Any tips, Talat? Where do you even start for that?
So this is tricky. This is really tricky. And I think one of the things that I did was get in touch with people who I know were doing, because the other part of all this, of course, is there's so many different things that you can be freelance in, and they're not necessarily compatible. So your pricing range won't be compatible. But if there's people that you know, that you trust, who are doing things that are freelance, or who have hired people who are freelance in the area you want to be in, ask them. Ask 5 or 6 people, figure out an average within that, and pitch there. One of the things that I would say to you is, you don't have to stick to what you start with. If you're starting off and you've put yourself, you feel like actually what I'm doing isn't covering my costs, or I've actually noticed that this is higher, your next project, you can be charging more, and you can explain that actually this is my first time that I'm doing this and I've realized that I need to charge a better rate. So what I would recommend is getting in touch with people who've either hired someone or are in similar spaces to you and are looking to be, and are already consultants, and asking them how much they charge, and just getting 5 options and sticking an average and going in the middle, and then seeing what that feels like in your projects is what I would really recommend. And you know, the word of mouth thing, starting off, I was nodding my head there at Briana, starting off is really hard, and I started off in a really privileged position because I had been working in the space I'm now consulting in for, you know, over a decade, right? So there were contacts made, and people knew what it is that I do, I think. And so they could just get in touch about it. But one of the reasons why myself, Ellie and Kate put together the collective is that actually we have associates with the collective. So we, as people who are established, will do projects with other people who are less well established, particularly in the Scottish landscape, so that they're able to go, I've just finished this project working as a researcher on this piece of work, and they are sharing our contact base. So actually finding partnerships with established consultants to do a bit of the project that they're doing means that you get to be a bit of their, take a bit of their contact directory, also build your own contact directory, and then get to say, I'm experienced in X. So if there are things that we're doing at the collective that you're interested in, you can get in touch with us, and there's ways to be an associate and part of that. But finding other people who've done it and partnering with them and using that as your first couple of projects, your first couple of contracts, I would really recommend. And also writing a tender with some people who have already done it is something I would really recommend, because it can be quite if it's, you know, Public Contract Scotland, it is a very bureaucratic, it's a very detailed plan you need to give, and then you need to work out if it's just somebody who wants you to give them a 2-pager on what it is you might do, what do they actually want in that 2-pager. So maybe find some partnerships in the first year to do some consultancy contracts with, to establish your experience and establish your contact base.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we've got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to give each of the panelists like a minute tops, and which I probably won't time, but I might, to basically give, to wrap up this session, what is the one piece of advice you would give someone who is considering going freelance? So if you could sum up everything in the hour, what's your top thing that you would say is important? I'm going to start with Lisa.
Go with your gut, go with your instinct. That's what I've done with every single project that I've been, so kindly offered. And there's things that came my way that just for whatever reason at that particular time may not feel quite right, and I've decided not to go there, and I haven't regretted anything. Actually, everything that I've been involved in, I've absolutely loved it. It's taught me something. It's led me to a new group of people, and I would just say, just go with your gut and reach out to people. People are great. People will help you. They really will, and not just from your sector. So I definitely think just put yourself out there and trust your instincts.
Fabulous. Dani?
Sorry. Yeah, agree with that. I think there's no one way, and I think the world of work is changing anyway, so we're not sticking at one job for 30 years. A lot of people have 3 or 4 different jobs, and it is about finding your own path, and just to bring in the power of networks. I think it's super important. I think it's pretty easy in Scotland. I think it's a lovely small enough space with helpful networks out there to tap into, and that's what they're there for. Scotland's pretty good at funding these bodies, and they're there, they want to help you, so don't be afraid of asking for that assistance. Just you say yes a lot in the first bit, and you learn a lot, and then you kind of need to look back in. You're looking out all the time when you're starting because you're comparing, but then you need to look back in, because then the answers are really there for you to make it work for yourself.
Thank you. Talat?
I would say become comfortable with shameless self-promotion. This is the ickiest, most uncomfortable bit of what I do, which is approaching conversations as if you are being interviewed, because you are, because they want to know whether you can do the task, or putting together your website and asking people. I had to get in touch with people and say, could you give me a testimonial of what you think my work is like? It's like asking, could you send me an email of all the best things that you like about me? It feels really self-indulgent, but there isn't, you can't hide behind an organization that's going to give a bio about you. And then, so you have to be able to promote yourself and be comfortable with promoting yourself. Don't be arrogant about it. I'm not recommending that, but certainly be comfortable talking about what you're good at, because you are your own advertising. You're trying to get clients, you're trying to get contracts. So getting a website, getting people to talk about what you're good at, and you being able to share what you do well on social media or LinkedIn is something that I would really recommend, no matter how icky it feels.
That's very good advice. And Briana, to wrap us up, what are your parting words of wisdom?
I would say to have courage, be comfortable with discomfort, and understand that your freelance journey is a learning journey and will require some risks and lessons. And that doesn't mean that it's impossible. It doesn't mean that it's going to be terrible. I don't regret a single freelance job I've taken or anything that I've done. But, there will be times where you don't know about work coming in, or you're not sure where you're going to get your next job. And that's just part of the fun, and it can be a challenge, but that's part of maybe the trade-off of, not being employed by one body. And as Dani said, the way we work is changing. The future of work is this, so I think if you're doing it now and giving it a shot, and don't jump straight in, maybe like I did, maybe have a part-time job and test it out. You can't go wrong.
Thank you so much. That was a really great panel, and we managed to keep it all in. I did have a question about COVID, but do you know what? I think we've all spoken quite a lot about COVID outside of these, and I think we could run a whole webinar about how well or not the government has supported freelancers during the pandemic. So we'll leave that there. Thank you, Lisa, Dani, Talat, and Briana for all your contributions. Thank you to Amy for facilitating. And as we said, this recording will be up on YouTube, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.